Right, let's get in a pollster to tell us what does it look like 48 hours ahead of that contest, a crucial contest. David Schultz, who's an American pollster, joins me on the broadcast. Good to have you, sir. Let me first ask you, what's your reading of the situation? It's as neck and neck as it gets. How do you read it? Can you, in fact, pick a winner in this?
Okay, my current reading at this point is that it clearly is too close to call. First, remember, in the national popular vote, it's very close, but the national popular vote doesn't mean anything in the United States because we don't elect presidents by national popular vote. The race is down to about 5 to 6 or 7 swing states, where again, the race is very, very close at this point. Polls are suggesting that maybe at this point, Harris has a very, very slight lead in those critical swing states, but all of this is within the margin of error. What we should be looking at in the next 48 hours, as we should be looking at from the last few days, is where are the candidates spending their money and resources? They're spending their money, if you're in terms of those critical swing states, but specifically, Harris has been working on the get out the vote strategy and mobilizing voters versus at this point, Trump seems to be putting more of his resources into litigation and potential legal challenges. So that may be telling us something about how the campaigns view their prospects at this point.
David, what about specific states that could actually throw up a surprise? We've been talking about swing states, but what about any surprises? Maybe Michigan, which has a large Muslim American population, given what's happening in West Asia right now?
I do. So if we think about it, the states that are in play, it appears to be, are Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. There's some evidence that maybe a couple of other states are in play, but those are the core ones. But among those, it is really Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Those three states in 2016 voted for Donald Trump and he won. Those three states voted for Joe Biden in 2020 and he won. Those I think are really the core swing states at this point. And if we had to isolate it even more, it really is Pennsylvania. It becomes very difficult for Kamala Harris to win the presidency if she does not win Pennsylvania. It's possible, but difficult for Donald Trump to win the presidency without winning Pennsylvania. But in many ways, it's going to really come down to that state. But it's going to come down to within those states, collectively, across all those swing states. I've been arguing that about 150,000 to 200,000 swing voters will decide the election. And in the closing days, in these closing days of the election, it's going to be regarding whether or not women show up to vote, and especially female voters under the age of 30. If those two groups of people show up to vote, Kamala Harris wins the election. If they don't show up in sufficient numbers, Donald Trump wins the presidential election.
Yes, indeed, it is about getting your voters to the polling booth. But, staying here, the sense I get is there's also a lot of emotions playing out. There's a lot of below the belt comments being made by both candidates. How do you see that impacting the psyche of voters as they head to the polling booths?
Sure. I think there's two ways to think about this election. The first is if we were to go back 2 years ago and to look at where America was 2 years ago, it was at that point we thought it was going to be Biden versus Trump, and the election was very, very close. National popular vote and in the swing states. 2 years later, even though it is now Trump versus Harris, we're in the exact same place. And the reason why I mention this is that we are an incredibly divided country in which there are very, very few undecided voters. But among those issues that seem to be important is that for some, especially Republicans, it's all about the economy, specifically the price, let's say, of food and gasoline, and about immigration. For Democrats, especially female voters, the issue really seems to be abortion. And much in the same way, in 2022, for some voters, it was about the issue of abortion, some about the economy, and it kind of tipped towards abortion being the driving issue that brought women to the polls. That's where we are in 2024 right now, is that for those who consider themselves to be Democrats and for many independents, it really is first abortion or reproductive rights. For Republicans, it's the economy. And what we're going to see on election day is which of those two issues seems to be driving which voters to the polls. That's probably the defining way of thinking about it in terms of issues. But those issues are only a placeholder for a broader divide in America.
All right, David, thanks much for speaking to me on NDTV. We come back and talk on the election night and dissect some of those results.